ado, I'm going to call Alex Cunningham to move the motion, and I will then call the Minister to respond. Mr Cunningham.
I formally move the motion that this House has considered the governance of the North East and Hartlepool NHS Foundation Trust. I'm pleased to serve under your chairmanship for this short debate about the historic governance of the Trust and the way the management of the NHS North East and Yorkshire have dealt with a formal inquiry which questioned the integrity and performance of the board over 2 years ago. The outcome of that inquiry actually remains a mystery, as NHS North East and Yorkshire have fought for the last 2 years to keep the report a secret, a fight that is continuing today and not just through my speech. But before I get into the detail of the failures of NHS North East and its leadership, I wanted the House to know that I was proud to serve as a non-executive director of the Trust before I was elected to Parliament nearly 14 years ago. I was proud that the Trust was recognised not just for sound finances and delivery for patients, but for innovation and a can-do, will-do attitude, something that continued long after I found myself in this place. Much of the credit for that performance being maintained goes to the non-executive directors, who gave a large part of their lives to the Trust and provided a robust challenge to the executive. That ensured that the Trust's performance, finances and proposals for new projects were examined in detail, not simply signed off, but they were forensically examined to ensure they were all delivering for patients. So, Charles, we all owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to them and all independent non-executive chairs and directors for the work they do across our country, often in the most difficult of circumstances. Sadly, 2 years ago, we saw the Trust go through a very difficult patch, including the resignation of several non-executive directors, a few of whom I put on record as my friends. That happened after the NHS regional leadership launched an inquiry that, as I said, questioned the integrity and performance of the Trust board and, in particular, its non-executives, a Trust that was rated good. The contents of the ensuing report sadly remain shrouded in secrecy, although that can only be described as a well-edited but short summary was published in 2022. The inquiry was launched after a robust challenge from the non-executive directors to a proposal from the then new joint chair of the North and South East NHS Foundation Trust, Professor Derek Bell, to have a joint chief executive on an accelerated timescale. I suspect to this day that this was being driven not by the chair of the Trust, but by officials in the regional office, led by Regional Director for the North Eastern Yorkshire and North West regions, Richard Barker. So much for local decision-making. Now, I do not lightly name an official on the floor of the House, but given his approach to the issues of inquiry, I believe that in the interest of natural justice, I have no other option. The proposal for the new Joint Chief Executive in November 2021, it appeared to the non-executive directors, was being rapidly pushed through without due process, including consultation with the health and wider community, and there was no proper papers nor business case for the idea. And that meant there were no answers to the robust challenges from the non-executive directors. Their views and concerns I can capture in a few bullet points. The Joint Chair's proposal was made without consultation or discussion with the NEDs or governors. Principles of good governance and due process were being ignored or sidelined. The proposed timetable was highly risky and unlikely to lead to a sound appointment of a joint CEO. Any proposal to install a joint CEO and potentially some form of amalgamation of management structures would require careful planning, options appraisal and scenario modelling, extensive consultation with the boards and governors, senior trust staff and other stakeholders, and expert input from human resources and legal teams. The timeline for a successful appointment of a joint CEO would likely to be 18 months to 2 years, not a matter of just a few weeks. The non-executive directors summarised their concerns and objections in a formal document with an outline of how to organise progress towards a joint CEO and potentially a joint management structure in a way that would minimise risks and maximise benefits. The Joint Chair's response was, I'm told, obdurate and unyielding. There was no offer to discuss the matter at full board or at a Council of Governors meeting or to consider an alternative to his existing proposal. Trust between the Joint Chair and the non-executive directors had been severely damaged by his actions. It was at that stage that a member of the board, concerned that there was no proper process and they were being steamrolled into a decision, alerted me to what was going on. And for me, Sir Charles, that was the real reason for the inquiry. Now, I believe NHSE's influence on the Joint Chair's proposal was palpable and unhelpful. In late December 2021, the Joint Chair, CEO, Deputy Chair and Senior Independent NED were called to a meeting at short notice with representatives of NHSE, including Richard Barker, National Board Directors Sir Andrew Morris and Sir David Sloman, as well as the North Eastern Cumbria Integrated Care Board Chair Sir Liam Donaldson. Although the NHSE representatives recognised that they had no formal powers to oblige the board of a foundation trust to change its organisational form, they were insistent that the Joint Chair's original proposal should go ahead as quickly as possible. The trust was informed that it had until the end of January to agree a plan. The meeting ended with comments from the NHSE representatives, "Don't tell us it's going to take 2 years," and "just get on with it." Some would suggest that this was simply an exercise in bullying. In January 2022, it became clear to the non-executive directors that they couldn't approve a proposal which wasn't supported by a full and proper case. But within a month, Mr Barker ordered the investigation into whether the board was acting in a unitary fashion, their behaviour and their leadership. On the 18th of February, 5 of the 6 NEDs resigned with immediate effect as they felt they were being prevented from doing the job they believed they had been appointed to do, and that NHSE and the Joint Chair would steamroll their way to their desired outcome, regardless of any advice to the contrary. I suspect that is exactly what the powers that be wanted. The removal of people who were not sticking to the line or doing what the officials wanted, but instead were maintaining their independence and putting patients first. There was an allegation that the non-executive directors were somehow deliberately delaying the proposal for a joint chief executive. So were they supposed to roll over and not do their scrutiny job properly? Now, I'm sure the Minister will understand non-executive directors were insisting on due process and consultation with the Trust's wide range of partners, and I believe to this day they were right to ensure others were aware of what was going on. They were also concerned, as I was, that it was the start of a merger process for the two trusts, one at that time considered high-performing, that's North Tees, and the other struggling and under considerable scrutiny from the Care Quality Commission, South Tees. Happily, there have been improvements since. Non-executive directors are required to be independent and put patients' interests first. Their robust challenge was clearly not appreciated by the chair and regional bosses. And you know, those people, those non-executive directors were local. They knew their community and wanted to do their best for them. And I would like to put on the record, Sir Charles, the fact that not one of the new non-executive directors lives within the general area served by the Trust, a completely opposite picture to the one before. And it took me several attempts to find out where the new people hailed from, and only when I issued a request under the Freedom of Information system was I told the answer. The new non-executive team come from Stafford, Hexham, Newcastle, Middlesbrough, which is quite nearby, Crook and Northallerton. I would hope the Minister would not acknowledge that the idea of local trust was just that, local, and local people know best the needs of their community. I now want to turn specifically to the outcome of the inquiry, which, as I said, remains a mystery to all, including those who were investigated. The full report is being kept under wraps by NHS North East and Yorkshire executives, despite Richard Barker sitting in my office in Stockton and assuring me that it would be made public. What on earth have they all got to hide? Perhaps the fact that their actions were being questioned, or that they had needlessly mounted an inquiry because the non-executive directors wanted to understand why a joint chief executive was being proposed and wouldn't just roll over. So when Mr Barker refused to publish the report in full, as he promised, I wrote to him several times, but had to resort to the FOI request, which was ignored for a considerable time. I did think, Sir Charles, that I had finally persuaded them when I eventually got a copy of the report, but it is so heavily redacted by Mr Barker and his team as to render it useless. Excuses that individuals had to be protected was far from satisfactory. Now, we still don't know whether or not the report showed the non-executive directors were failing in their duty, or whether the NH North East England were even justified in mounting the inquiry. As I have said, The fight for the full report continues today, and whilst I contested the decision for the reductions, I decided, on learning that one of the former non-executive directors was pursuing it through the Information Commissioner, to allow that action to take its course, and that is still in play. Today, I'm asking the Minister to save the Information Commissioner a job and order Mr Barker, who not only commissioned the report and then blocked its publication, to publish it now. He should also find out why this sorry mess was allowed to be created in the first place. As I have said, the decision to mount the inquiry calls into question the integrity of people of long-standing service, yet not even they have been allowed to see it. They remain damaged by what has gone on, and they deserve to know what the report says, a report that cost tens of thousands of pounds. They want to see whether it is critical of them or not. I suspect the report remains under wraps because it may be critical of others in this sorry saga. In fact, I know that to be the case, Sir Charles. Mr Barker, when he promised me in my Stockton office full transparency and publication of the report, he said that it would be critical of the Chair's role in the scandal, which, as I said, was omitted from the short summary report published by the region and isn't obvious from the redacted report. Mr Barker also acknowledged that the region could have handled the matter better, and I suspect the report does too. He too now needs to be held accountable, and I have in the past called for his resignation. I have no doubt the regional officials certainly have some questions to answer about the appalling way they have handled this matter. Going back to the central issue, neither the non-executive directors nor myself were opposed to the idea of a joint chief executive. In fact, I placed on record that I wasn't even opposed to one day the two trusts becoming one, provided our local services, our local hospital services, were maintained and even improved. And yes, Sir Charles, the regional officials did get their way in the end, but it was a genuine pleasure for me, and I honestly mean this, a genuine pleasure for me to meet the new Joint Chief Executive recently when the Mayor of Stockton-on-Tees, Jim Beale, held his charity ball. Only time will tell if a Joint Chief Executive is the right decision. I sincerely hope it is. I reiterate and ask the Minister to order the publication of what should never have been a secret report. It's in the interests of natural justice and the right thing to do, and will give those affected the chance to move on with their lives. I did provide the Minister's office with a gist of the issues I wanted to raise today, and can provide him with a much more full timeline, which is too detailed for me to put on record today. I now look forward to a positive response, which I hope can help us draw a line under this whole sorry matter.
Thank you, Mr Cunningham. Minister of State.
Sir Charles, it's a pleasure to see you in the chair. And can I start by congratulating the Honourable Member for Stockton North for securing this important debate.
Can I just stop, Minister? I've made a procedural error. Gosh. The question is that this House has considered governance of North Tees and Hartlepool NHS Foundation Trust. Minister of State.
Sir Charles, it's a great pleasure to still see you in the chair. Can I congratulate the Honourable Member for Stockton North for securing this important debate. He has used it to raise important questions that are vital to NHS governance, localism, transparency and accountability. And he's right that patients in his constituency and in the wider region should be at the forefront of decision-making about their healthcare. NHS England has found that shared leadership and group working arrangements between trusts can stabilise governance and align approaches to help improvement. Certainly.
Very legitimate questions, very legitimate concerns, and the way forward with mergers, joint working. But one of the issues in our part of the world is that South Tees was burdened with this huge PFI deal at James Cook that cost £1 million a week by the last Labour government. And that's what makes this contentious. That's what makes it so difficult to see joint working in our part of the world.
Minister of State.
I thank my honourable friend for the point that he makes. I recognise that these are two trusts with very different characteristics, and he is right about the eye-watering legacy in one of the trusts of, I think it's £57 million a year of PFI debt, which can mean that joint working can be controversial. But I hope to get to in my speech to say I have been assured very much that the two trusts want to work together in joint arrangements, not to merge. So I hope we can set the record clearly today that that is what I've heard in doing the research behind this speech, that this is not the prelude to a kind of merger through the back door. This is trust wanting to work together to address the healthcare needs in the area. It is right that any decision about shared leadership arrangements are made in Stockton, not in Westminster. However, where an NHS trust is facing performance challenges, the government backs targeted interventions by NHS England, bringing the trust together to properly diagnose the problem and develop an improvement plan which could include shared leadership. Any leadership changes should be consistently kept under review to ensure that they are effectively delivering for patients and for the local area. The point is to help challenge trusts improve and to take ownership of local issues. And external evaluations of NHS England's leadership interventions have found them to be effective. Let me now turn to address the current leadership arrangement of North and South Tees trusts. Up and down the country, trust governance fits a variety of different frameworks. As the Honourable Gentleman knows, putting a round peg in a square hole is pointless. But whilst we support a diversity of models, I'm crystal clear every arrangement should be geared around building a faster, simpler and fairer NHS that works for both patients and staff. I'm happy to assure him that in this instance, I have been assured that the shared leadership and joint working arrangements are not in any way a precursor to trust merger or acquisitions. In other words, both trusts intend to remain statutory organisations in their own right. NHS England promotes these models of working to maintain consistency within trusts and make sure everyone is on the same page when lessons are being learnt. However, for over 10 years now, North and South Tees have been discussing how to work together to provide a better offer for the people of Stockton. Certainly.
Minister, I might like just to acknowledge that the North Tees and Hartlepool Trusts and the South Tees Trust have worked together for many, many, many years. It's not a case of how they can do it in the future. They have been doing it for many years.
Minister of State.
They have been doing it for many years, and there are shared challenges in the area that they need to work together on. And this is a model of operation which has worked in many parts of the country. I am hoping that what the Honourable Gentleman describes has been very much, therefore, a bump in the road rather than something that characterises the past 10 years of joint work, most of which seems to have been constructive and has been conducted through local consensus. In September 2021, the Trust appointed a joint chair. Just over a year later, they announced plans to form a group model to strengthen health services in the local area. This group model was intended to improve recruitment and retention of specialist doctors and nurses, ensure join-up with local communities and partners, and secure capital investment to rebuild and upgrade hospital facilities. To deliver this new way of working, I understand that North Tees and South Tees Foundation Trusts engage extensively with partners in the local area. There is now strong collaborative work taking place across the Tees Valley in the long-term interests of patients. The North Tees Foundation Trust is one of the best performing providers across the country for urgent and emergency care. The area's NHS urgent care services will now be run by an alliance of 4 health organisations, including the North Tees and South Tees Foundation Trusts. Together, this partnership will oversee minor injuries and illnesses across the Tees Valley, including urgent care centres at the University Hospital of Hartlepool, the University Hospital of North Tees and Redcar Primary Care Hospital. And I'm delighted the new urgent treatment centre at the James Cook University Hospital opened in March. We're backing the centre with a £9 million investment in urgent care services on Teesside that will integrate services, provide patients with care close to home and ease pressures on A&E. We should also celebrate the new government-funded Tees Valley Community Diagnostic Centre, which will open in Stockton Town Centre later this year. This centre will offer rapid scans, tests and checks for a number of major conditions. It will help thousands of people access simpler services with easily accessible life-saving tests and faster treatment. Turning to the investigation the Honourable Member for Stockton North raised in his remarks. I understand NHS England looked into the proposed appointment of a joint chief exec, as well as the actions and the behaviours of the board. They aim to find out whether these concerns amounted to a breach of the trust's licence. The investigation determined that the trust board had not acted consistently in relation to moving to a single chief executive appointment for South Tees. This provided evidence to suspect a breach of a provider licence by the North Tees and Hartlepool Trust, which would normally lead to formal regulatory action being taken. However, after careful consideration, NHS England decided the Trust should implement the recommendations on a voluntary basis.
We'll recognise that by then the non-executive directors had in fact moved on. They'd actually resigned from their post in protest at the lack of process in the way that the whole thing was being dealt with. Does the Minister and maybe even the region accept that they could have handled this matter a hang of a lot better?
Minister of State.
And so I hope the honourable gentleman recognises that local governance arrangements and also the operation, these are very much operational matters for NHS England and for the region. I think certainly given the concerns that he has outlined, it is quite clear that things could have been done better to take people with them rather than alienate people. I would also kind of echo the tributes that he paid to people who serve as non-exec directors on trust boards across the length and breadth of the country. They play an absolutely vital role in local NHS governance, and therefore whatever the reasons behind their resignation, it is regrettable to see a large number of non-execs resign for any reason. But looking at the reasons behind that, investigating the best way forward is something that I think is best delivered by the NHS, not dictated centrally by ministers. The recommendations that came out of the report were to present a summary of the report at the next board meeting and agree an action plan for the next steps, which has now been completed. It was also to ensure that proper consultation between board members of both organisations takes place in future so they can reach the best collective decision for better services for Stockton. I hope that now the trusts are able to move forward with these new arrangements, especially with a new joint partnership board, establishing a clear chain of accountability going forward to address the challenges they've had during this troubled period. In wrapping up, Sir Charles, I'd like to thank the honourable member for bringing this debate forward. Yeah.
Mr Cunningham.
The Minister just indicated that he's wrapping up, but the central question here is whether or not that report is going to be published or not. I have a heavily redacted report. There's more black ink on it than white paper. Does he accept that those people have the right to understand what judgments were made in relation to the accusations made against them, and they should in fact see the full report, not a version from the person who has actually ordered the report and then refused to publish it?
I hope the honourable gentleman will appreciate that the NHS commission a large number of reports into a whole range of services. It is when those reports are published internally, we are expecting all participants to be frank and open with investigations, and they do so on the basis that they are internal reports to improve the governance of the organisation. It is not expected, and it is not the normal course for such a report to be published. My understanding is, following the gentleman's freedom of information request, the report was published in a heavily redacted fashion, as he said. The redactions were made by NHS England in accordance with their policies. It is not a report that I am privy to, or to the best of my knowledge hasn't even been shared with the department. This is a NHS England report which has been published in accordance with their usual practices.
I find that frankly amazing that a minister can't even get access to a report which questioned the integrity of 5 long-standing non-executive directors who then resigned because of the lack of due process in the appointment. But I would remind him, as I said in my speech, Mr Barker sat in my office and he told me face to face he would publish the report, that I would get to see it. He's reneged on that promise. Don't you think he should fulfil it, Minister?
Minister of State.
I would, unfortunately, Sir Charles, just reiterate the point that A summary of the recommendations from this investigation were published. They were shared with the board. They are accessible by anyone who wishes to see them. He, through his own endeavours, has been able to secure a copy of the redacted full version of the report. That has been, as far as I can see in the investigations I have made, that has been published fully in accordance with NHS England's normal practices. This is something which clearly has led to a rocky period for the Trust, but I believe those recommendations that have been shared with the board are now being resolved, and that the group model of working, as I have said clearly today, is not a merger by the back door. I know that by bringing this debate forward, the honourable gentleman wanted to give greater impetus for the trusts to get their act together and to resolve these issues, and I'm absolutely sure that those he's mentioned today and members of the Trust Board will have been listening, and I would urge them to work with him and to work with other local MPs to ensure that any of the concerns that he has raised and other concerns that other honourable members may have are addressed in due course. Thank you.
No, not in the half-hour debate. The question is that this House has considered governance at North Tees and Hartlepool NHS Foundation Trust. Many of the applicants say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting is suspended until 2:30. Alex, it's not a...
The proceeding has ended. 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 The proceeding has ended.